you don't understand something, ask. If you don't understand it still, ask me again. I do try and make the really technical seem really simple, but that's because archery is simple and we just like to make it complicated. So if you do need help, just shout, please, or not shout because you're on mute, but wave or chat box. Okay, so we're going to buzz through these first quick ones. Parts for compound bow. The riser. Fairly simply, the riser can be a standard type, which is the normal, I don't know if you can see my webcam as well, but a normal straightforward riser that you're all used to, or a shoot-through type. A shoot-through type has two sides to the sight window. Okay, that effectively stiffens the riser and makes it a damn sight heavier. There are companies now that add a bolt-on shoot-through to your riser. It doesn't really do a lot apart from make your bow heavier. Risers come right or left-handed, obviously, ambidextrous, which is quite a good bonus. They're made from either carbon, cast aluminium, or CNC'd aluminium. You do get other materials, but we won't really worry about that too much. The most common and by far the most efficient at the moment is CNC'd aluminium by a considerable way. Okay, so then we've got the limbs. You either have 2 limbs or 4 limbs. Okay, the limbs are either going to be short or they're going to be long. They're either made from carbon and glass, foam, carbon. I've got glass in there twice. And the limbs are, if there's 4 of them, they are right-handed and left-handed. It is very rare for a bow manufacturer to make a quad limb bow with a ambidextrous, because it's incredibly difficult to work it out. The reason behind the different limb lengths and quantity of limb is fairly simple. So most bows now are 4-limbed. The reason they're 4-limbed is because every time you shoot the bow, the cam is trying to snap the limb in half. If you have 2 limbs with no join in the middle, you can't snap it in half. It's really as simple as that. If you have a single solid limb, eventually you will break it just for use. If you have 2 split limbs, you can't break it. Okay, short or long. Okay, limbs nowadays tend to be really, really short, like that, if you can see my webcam. Okay, the reason limbs are short now is because A, we can make them short now, whereas we used to have to make them very, very long because it was the only way we could do it. It's a lot more energy efficient if your limb doesn't move very far. So most of the draw weight, the speed, the accuracy, everything from the bow itself now comes from the cams rather than the limbs, because it's much easier to make a cam more technologically advanced than a limb, mainly because limbs are only basically glass fiber. Okay, the reason limbs, if there's 4 of them, can be right-handed and left-handed is because the string is not necessarily in the middle of the bow left to right. In fact, it's quite rare for the string to be in the middle left to right. We'll come on to why that is in a little while. But does that all make sense so far? Because that was probably the most technical bit in the entire presentation. No one's screaming at me, so that's good. Cams. Cams are wonderful things. Basically, a cam does all of the work. All of the stuff that you put into the bow is going into the cam then does the rest of it for you. There are many, many, many different types of cam, which we will come on to in a little while. The main differences between the cams is there's a single cam, which means you've got one cam and an idler wheel. You've got the hybrid cam, which is not quite a twin cam, but almost. You've got a twin cam, which is two cams. You have a binary cam, which is two cams that aren't connected to the limbs in any way other than the cams. You have a single hybrid cam, which is a single cam with normally a twin or a 3-track idler wheel. Effectively, it makes making strings and cables a damn sight easier. Only one company, to my knowledge, really pushed it, which was PSE a few years ago. I don't know why no one else took it on, because it just makes making single cam bows simpler and easier for everybody to deal with. Okay. Strings and cables. There are 3 different strings and cables. You have a string on a twin cam bow or a hybrid bow. The string is the bit you pull, obviously. You then have 2 cables. On a proper twin cam bow, you have 2 cables with a thing called a yoke on. A yoke splits in half and it joins each side of the limb. Okay, so either side of the top cam and either side of the bottom cam on a standard twin cam bow. What the yoke enables you to do is make sure your limb is straight. That sounds like a very bizarre thing to want to be able to do. We'll come onto that a little bit in a little while, but that is the purpose of a yoke. It means that when limbs were long and sloppy, we could straighten limbs out by twisting up the yoke side to side. That is also called the bus cable. It's easier if you just called it the yoke cable, because it's the cable with the yoke in. You then have a control cable. A control cable goes between the 2 cams and does not connect to the limb in any way. Okay? The purpose of the control cable is to keep the cams in time. The bus cable just pulls the bottom limb, or the top limb, depending on which round it is, up and aids the draw cycle. It doesn't really do a lot other than that. Okay? Materials. One of the most commonly asked questions I have are, what is the best string material I could use on my compound bow? And I've got a big news flash for everybody. They're all made from the same thing. Regardless of what brand of string material you use, it comes out of the same factory. It is then sent to Brownell, to BCY, to whoever else you buy string material from, and they then turn it into this magic number formula. It is the same raw ingredient. Sorry to disappoint all of the string fanatics out there. I spent quite a considerable time last year talking to different companies that actually make the material, the raw material, and yes, it is the same. Strand count. So with a strand count, it basically makes your string thicker and thinner. So the less strands you have, the thinner your string. The more strands you have, the thicker your string. Fairly straightforward. One thing to remember is the less strands you have, in theory, the faster your string will travel, therefore your arrow will travel. Okay? Sounds brilliant, but the faster your string travels, the harder it is to shoot. Okay? A thin string is very, very unstable. So if you make a mistake, it will wobble around a lot more than it would if it was thicker. However, a thicker string is slower. So we're in this world where you've got to balance it out fairly equally between strand count and speed. Most people shoot between 20 and 24 strands on a compound. Cables usually are thicker. Okay, the reason for cables being thicker is because they're not really moving that far, so it doesn't matter. You might as well have something thicker and heavier to do the job better and more efficiently. Okay. So you've then got the modules on the cams. Okay. So what modules do on an adjustable bow, modules quite simply change the draw length. What they can also do is change the let off. I think it's that one. Hey, can you see me now? Right. So a module here has lots of different holes in. I won't undo it because my son will probably kill me if I change his draw length. What we would do is undo the screw, move the module away from the cable, to make it longer, towards the cable to make it shorter. On this model, if you can see, this curve here isn't even. Okay, it gets gradually steeper and steeper and then tails off. It's not a very good, I'm trying to get it clear. What that angle movement does is that changes the let off. Okay, so that's how much weight you're holding at full draw. Nearly all bow companies now have different let off models, either as a cam option or a module option. The different module options, whether it's a cam option or an actual removable module option, the thing that's changing is in effect the module. For instance, Hoyt used to do 2 different let-off options on a solid cam. Although you were buying a separate cam to change the let-off, effectively the only thing that's changing is the module part of it. Most companies have stopped doing that now because it's an incredibly expensive way of making a little tiny piece of aluminium. Right. Done modules. Right. Everybody happy with the parts of a compound bow? Yep, good. Right, when you are helping somebody select the compound bow, or you are selecting a compound bow for yourself, these are the 5 most important things you need to remember. Cam shape, cost, adjustability, mass weight, and draw weight. Okay, the most important, I think, that a lot of people forget is cost. Okay, cost probably outweighs most of the other options. I see a lot of people told to buy something that is just pointlessly expensive. So, starting with cost, compound bows will shoot high scores regardless of their price. I will put a limit on that. You're probably looking at about £700 upwards. They will shoot consistently, and consistently enough to shoot good scores. Okay. Top range bows are designed to be shot by top of the range archers. They're not designed to be shot by Joe Bloggs down the club. If Joe Bloggs wants to buy a top end bow, great, but it would probably be better if he didn't. It would be a lot easier to shoot. If you're shooting really consistently, then it's worth spending top dollar on a bow. But before that, it's kind of just making your learning more difficult. To start with, look at buying second hand, because it's a good way of buying a good bow a lot cheaper. Okay, my little disclaimer to that is always buy from a shop. Do not buy a compound bow online. Compound bows are dangerous. If you buy one that someone's dry fired, you are probably going to get hurt. And because you bought it on eBay or on Facebook, there is no comeback on the seller. So just beware when you're buying compounds used, especially if they said they've been shot on the British team, because I know what happens to those bows and you really don't want to buy one of those. Adjustability, okay, is a really good idea for growing kids, and if you're trying it for the first time and you're not sure what your draw length is or what your draw weight you're going to end up with. But it does mean there's a lot more to go wrong. Okay, this is, I think, what Hannah alluded to with my my bluntness. The cynic in me says that the more adjustability in something, the bigger tolerances manufacturers can work with to making it cheaper for them to produce. However, we always pay more for adjustable things in archery. So we're paying more for the manufacturers to make it cheaper. I don't quite understand that, but there you go. Okay, so the question to ask of anyone buying a compound is, do they need adjustability? Yes or no? If it's yes, how much? There's no point in someone buying a bow with a 10-inch draw length adjustment if they know what their draw length is within ½ inch and they're not likely to grow. It just seems a bit daft. You're buying something that you're never going to make use of. Okay, mass weight. The average mass weight of world-leading compound bows in 2019 was 4.904 pounds. The kilos conversion is underneath, but I don't like kilos. Mass weight has two things. Means it's easier to aim, in theory, if you can hold it still for long periods. Okay, if your bow is too heavy, how are you supposed to aim it? 50 meters is a long way, and if you're one of those people that want to shoot 90 or 100 yards, then it's even further. What's the point in having a bow that weighs too much? Draw weight and cam shape. This is where it's going to get a little bit complicated. I'm going to try and buzz through it as quickly as possible because I've just looked at the time and I've been waffling for too long already. Okay, so both of them affect what weight is possible to draw. For instance, on my bow, I shoot 60 pounds. However, I don't think I can pull any of the Para Squad's bows at 60 pounds because I'm a wuss and I have nice round cams. You should be able to pull straight. I know this seems really obvious and really sensible, but if you're having to bend your back to pull your bow, it's too heavy. The three main cam shapes, put really simply, you have an egg, you have a round wheel, and you have a square. Okay, the easiest one to pull back is going to be the round wheel. The medium one is going to be egg, and square is going to be hardest. Yeah, fairly simple. An egg-shaped cam. I love that cam because it is almost exactly an egg shape, and it does well. Okay, so it's hard to pull at the beginning, but the draw weight builds slower, and it comes on at the later part of the draw. So if we look at this really cool draw force curve that I drew, you can see here the weight builds up quite quickly, and then it tails off nice and slowly up to the peak, and then drops off. Okay, this is the most common cam shape because it is the easiest to design. A round wheel. This isn't strictly a round wheel, if anyone wants to pick me up on this, but it was the only picture I could find. So a round wheel, it builds weight very, very slowly, but is very forgiving. The reason it's forgiving is because it shoots very, very slowly. Okay, when Matthews launched this cam that this is a picture of, one of my best comments I heard about it was, if you shoot it, you can probably shoot it, put your bow down and walk to a target at 50 meters before your arrow lands there. However, I've shot a couple of these bows with these cams on, and I loved it because I'm rubbish and I could throw my arms wherever I liked and my arrow still landed somewhere near the middle. Okay, that is what I want from a bow. I don't want complexities. I want to enjoy archery. So a round wheel for someone that wants to enjoy and that is just learning or just wants to have a bit of fun and not get massively high scores, a round wheel is a brilliant way to go. A square cam. Square cams aren't common anymore because we have technology. Okay, if you go back to the mid 90s, early 90s, every bow worth its weight in gold was square cammed because it was the only way they could make compounds fast. We didn't have short limbs, we had quite long limbs, so they were quite flappy, and trying to get arrow speed up was difficult. So what they did is they made the cam as aggressive as possible. And what I mean by aggressive is as you pull back, the weight comes on really quite quickly, all the way up here, and then it drops off. Okay. Some top end bows use this still, but there's not many. If you make a mistake shooting a cam like this, it will be about as far from the middle as you can get. Really not ideal for beginners, but if you ever get a chance to shoot a bow with a cam like this, do, because it's fun. For about 3 arrows, then it hurts. Okay, any questions on cam shapes? No, I'll come back to it in a minute if we need some. Okay, understanding draw length, draw weight, and arrow speed. Something that we need to remember now is most of the compound industry is American, and it's all set by hunting organizations effectively. So I've written some facts on here. Fact number 1, shooting 60 pound will mean I'm more likely to win. Fact number 2, shooting 60 pound means nothing to your score sheet. Fact number 3, arrow speed is everything, faster is better. Fact number 4, to most archers, speed is not important. A slow 9 is better than a fast miss. Fact number 5, my draw length and my arrow length are the same thing. Fact number 6, my draw length and arrow length are 2 completely separate things that, although linked, may be completely different. I'm hoping you will realise that those 3 weren't facts. Shooting 60 pound does mean absolutely nothing on your score sheet, surprisingly. Lots of people are fairly obsessed in having to shoot 60 pounds, but it doesn't actually mean anything. Draw length. Trying to explain draw length to people is possibly the most complex part of my job because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So ammo draw length. Ammo is the Archery Manufacturers Organization, which is now called the Archery Trade Association, but the measurements are still referred to as ammo. Draw length is measured from the string to the buttonhole plus 1 3/4 inches. Okay, so if I have a 27-inch compound bow, to the buttonhole, it's 25 1/4. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's how it works. Although this is a trade standard, or even referred to as a regulation, I don't think I've ever managed to get 2 bows that actually do measure that. Manufacturing tolerances, just tweaks in design, it never ends up being perfect. And there are no exact ways of measuring or setting a draw length without trial and error. You can get lucky. I get lucky all the time. One of my biggest hates is the wingspan. If you put your arms out and then measure between your fingertips to your fingertips and divide by 2.5, it gives you your draw length. I have a friend that is exactly the same fingertip to fingertip as I am, yet he shoots 2 inches longer than me. But I don't quite understand how that works if it's meant to be exactly the same. It does work for some people, but it is not by any means gospel. Okay. Draw weight. I won't read the whole slide, but basically, draw weight is the measured peak weight of the bow, so the heaviest point in the draw. Okay, holding weight is measured at full draw, obviously. The let-off of the bow is always approximate. It is not exact. bows are designed nearly always at 70 pounds, and at 70 pounds with a certain module shape, you can get exactly 65% let off or 80% let off. If you modify the 70 pounds to 60 pounds, it doesn't necessarily equal exactly 65 or 80. Okay, so all of the measurements that we take as gospel probably aren't. The only way really to find out what your percentage let off is by getting a set of scales like these last chance ones in the slide that will actually do it for you. Just a rule thing in there, just because I'm a judge and I feel I ought to point it out. Maximum draw weight for all compound open classes, para and able-bodied, is 60 pounds, and it's 45 pounds for the W1 para category and VI categories. Understanding the let-off part of the draw cycle. So if you have a higher let-off, you are holding less weight. If you have a lower let-off, you're holding more weight, because it's a percentage let-off, so it's a percentage minus. So it's the opposite way to how it sounds. Higher let-off bows are much easier to hold at full draw because you're holding less weight. Simple as that. But they are harder to shoot accurately due to the launch time of the arrow. Okay, launch time of an arrow is something that is really often overlooked. What launch time means, and I'll try and play this video a few times for you. Launch time is the time it takes from the release aid breaking to the arrow leaving the string. Okay, if you think about this in really slow terms, the release aid goes off, the string stays still. After a few thousandths of a second, the string then goes, "Ooh, I need to move now," and then moves forwards. If you have, for instance, an 80% let off bow, the string takes a lot longer to realize that it needs to go somewhere than if you had a 60% let off bow. Does that make sense? It is quite a complicated subject, but it's not. I'm trying to make it simple without trying to overcomplicate it. But effectively, if we watch this video, if I can work out how to. So try and watch this now. So the release goes here, and then the string goes there. So that on my count is, I think, about 2 whatever that is of a second. Yeah, so if we had a higher let off bow, that 2 whatever it is of a second would be a lot longer. The reason it's harder to shoot accurately, because it takes longer to start to leave, or longer for the arrow to leave the string, you've got longer to move. It's really as simple as that. So if you shoot an 80% let off and you hold dead still and then you move slightly as the release aid goes off, your arrow's still attached for a lot longer, so you've got a lot more time to wallop it out of the way. Or steer it, as professional archers call it, but I call it walloping. Arrow speed. Okay, arrow speed is measured to either AMO, ATA, or IBO standards. Now, this always gets me really confused, so if I've got something written down wrong here, I apologize, but I am 99% sure it's right. AMO is measured at 60 pounds with a bow set to 30-inch draw length and a 29-inch arrow, weighing 9 grains per inch. So basically a fairly standard target setup. IBO is measured at 70 pounds, set at 30 inches, and a 30-inch arrow weighing 5 grains per inch. Basically the fastest setup you could possibly ask for. The reason IBO has done at that setup is IBO is the International Bow Hunting Organization. So they want arrow speed because they want to kill things. We don't want arrow speed because our targets don't tend to move unless it's windy or you're at Lillishall or both. Bow speed ratings are hard or impossible to get using target legal equipment. It's just a fact. Deal with it. If your bow says it does 330 and you get it out of the shop, you take it down your club and it's only doing 310, that's pretty good, to be fair. Very, very few bows actually do what they say they're going to do. The only comparison I can do is it's like car fuel economy in a factory is considerably better than when I drive it on the road. Speed is a useful if it's used in the correct way. Bows can be way too fast, but rarely are too slow. Okay, it's very, very difficult to get a compound bow now that goes so slow you can't shoot all the distances with it at any weight. However, you can make a bow fast. The reason you'd want to make a bow fast, for instance, with the paras that I work with, we have a couple that cannot shoot very high poundages. So to enable them to shoot well in the wind, it is better for them to have a faster bow. Because if your arrow's traveling faster to the target, the wind has less chance to move it left to right. Okay? Everybody, oh, I keep meaning to look at the chat questions, but right. What do stabilizers do? This is probably going to be the most contentious thing I'm going to say, so I apologize in advance. But what do stabilizers do? Stabilization is making the hold better. Stabilization is making your bow as heavy as possible so that you can hold it still and aim at the middle of the target. The last statement, you must shoot the stiffest rod possible, is a lie. Okay, your stabilizers can be too weak, but it's hard. Your stabilizer is nearly always now too stiff, because for some reason all of the stabilizer manufacturers have decided in their infinite wisdom that they're going to make really stiff rods. What happens with a stiff rod? What should happen when you shoot is your stabilizer should bend up and down like this, get rid of vibration, and making sure your handle stays still. If your stabilizer is too stiff, which is now more common than not, what happens is your stabilizer, I'm trying to get the whole bow in. What will happen is as you shoot, because the wave of vibration and force coming down here, what should happen is your stabilizer should bend and get rid of all that force and that vibration. What happens if it's too stiff is it goes like this, because it can't go anywhere, and it just comes backwards, and you end up with a bow rocking about backwards and forwards. And if your bow's rocking about backwards and forwards, how on earth are you supposed to get two arrows in the same place down there? Sorry, stabilizer manufacturers, but unless I'm missing some really vital parts of science, you're wrong. However, and this is the bit that everyone's going to go, oh yeah, the reason all of the world's best archers shoot really stiff stabilizers is quite simple, because they have massive amounts of weight on the end of them. If you put a massive amount of weight on the end of a stiff rod, you weaken it because you bend it. It's fairly simple. However, they're also shooting 200 to 300 arrows a day, so they can do it. I don't really recommend putting 15 ounces on a 30-inch stabilizer if you can help it. Again, if you're all coaches, something that I would really suggest to you to try is get a ridiculous amount of stabilizer weight, put it on your bow and shoot it. Just once, or 1 arrow or 2 arrows, it will be the best aiming shot you have ever made. But it will probably be in the 1 or the 2 at the bottom because you won't be able to lift it up. So the theory behind having massive stabilizer weights is valid if you shoot enough arrows to make it worth having. Okay. One of the things that I hate to see, and I see it more and more with the juniors that come up to Lilleshall, is juniors with so much stabilizer weight on their stabilizers because they want to be like Schlosser, they want to be like Hansen. Okay. Their shoulders aren't designed to take it. Having all of this weight on it is just making your arm rubbish for the rest of your life. Is it worth being good at archery for 5 years to not have an arm for most of your life? I think I'd rather be okay at archery for most of my life, but I'm not even that. So this is a little video. It might play, it might not. You need to look really carefully. So this is of a stabilizer that is too stiff. I'm sorry for the quality, but I had to crop a lot of it out so you didn't have half of Dubai in the background. But if you watch the stabilizer, the whole thing goes up and comes back down again at some point. Then it comes back down again. Then you can see those waves of energy coming through the carbon. I think it's about here. You can see that the whole rod's trying to bend, but it just physically can't because it's too stiff. Okay, the use of other dampers. Generally speaking, I think that all rubber parts on a bow should be banned in target. Most rubber parts, all they're doing is either slowing your bow down or making it quiet for no real reason because it doesn't matter how loud the bow is. Okay, if your bow makes a big bang when you shoot it, as long as it's not breaking anything, it doesn't really matter. However, there are exceptions. Okay, this bow is a brilliant exception. It's the longest bow I've ever worked on, and it's the most vibration happy bow I've ever worked on. So if I play this, if you watch this damper here, and you also watch the cam, imagine how much the cam would be moving if this wasn't here. Can you all see how much that's actually, the actual movement there? That damper's doing a lot of work, and it obviously needs to because this cam is still bouncing around a lot more than is necessary. I won't mention whose bow it is, but if you know the compound men's squad, it's the biggest one. There's not many bows that fit him. Okay, I'm now going to try and buzz through simple bow setup. Okay, as mentioned before, I would start by setting up the center shot. However, the center shot isn't in the center. If you look at this bited limb gauge here, the center of the limb gauge is actually here, but the cams line up with here. This is my center line where the cam and the string is, not here. Okay, very few bows are built with an offset in them. So always use the cam as the center shot, not the center of the riser. So after I've done the center shot, what I do is I find the middle of the buttonhole, I'll line up my bracing height gauge, and I'll then put on most top end bows, I'm not going to go through all of the different variations, but on most top end bows, go to the bottom of the nock, sits on 0. Okay. And then what we want to do is we're going to move our rest blade up and down until the arrow shaft is in the middle of the buttonhole. Some bow manufacturers, PSE and I think Elite do it as well, quite handily engrave a line across here, which just makes life a little bit easier. But you want to try and get it as close to the middle of that hole as possible. If you go lower, it's not really that much of an issue. If you go higher, it's a big issue. Okay, the higher you go above the buttonhole, the more susceptible to torque because it's further from the pivot point. Okay, so the pivot point is your wrist. If you wiggle it side to side, the further up from your wrist you go, the bigger the movement is. Does that make sense? Oh. Oh, I've just read some questions. Difference between spiral cams, cam and half, and other derivatives. Not really in this. I can send you a list of my opinions of spiral cams and cam and half. Spiral cams were probably the best cams ever made. Hoyt's cam and half system is now probably outdated though. I think there's a lot better things on the market now. Don't modern stabilizers rely on the material now to absorb the vibration? No, not really. There's apparently 17 million different formulas for carbon in a stabilizer. I want to take them all apart and have them tested because I'll be fairly sure they're all the same. Most of the carbon tubing that we use in this entire sport comes from the same place. So I'd be surprised if there was anyone using anything different. Okay, so once we've done that bit, we're going to align the sight, rest, and the string. Okay, we're going to ignore the long rod because there is a very, very, very high chance that it's not straight. A long rod probably has more tolerances in its manufacturing than any other piece of kit because there's so many joining parts, there's so many things that can be wrong. Well, not wrong, but within tolerance. Okay, so line up, rest, sight. Oh, so line up your rest with your string, your sight with your string, and that should be good to go. You might have to wiggle it about left and right a little bit, but that's a great setup point. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to skip how to tie a D-loop. There is a nice video on Learning Curve about how to tie a D-loop. The thing you need to remember when you tie a D-loop is the release aid needs to sit directly behind the knock. If your D-loop's too high, or if your D-loop ends up like this, so your release aid sits too high, what will happen is your arrow gets driven down into the rest. If your release aid sits too low, then your arrow leaves your rest prematurely, meaning they can go pretty much anywhere. This is a good video of what happens if your release aid sits. You can see it sits high, and you can all see that lovely bounce because that's the arrow plummeting into the arrow rest. There we go. Okay, quick one on sights. Okay, so the first axis is the left-right angle of your scope. The second axis is how it's spun, and the third axis is forwards and backwards. This will make a lot more sense if you look at this on Learning Curve, pause it here, and then get a sight and scope, and you can then see what it means. Leveling a sight isn't really important in target. It helps, but it's not really the be all and end all. So I wouldn't worry too much if it's slightly out. sights now are getting harder and harder to get right because they keep putting more adjustment in. Make sure your sight is tight. Oh, don't know where that went. Okay, paper tuning. Okay, if you get a left tail like this, you need to move your rest right. If you get a right tail like this, you need to move your rest left. These two could be the same thing, annoyingly. It's very, very hard to get this out of a paper tune. Basically, your knock would have to travel through your rest in order to get that, which it can't. So normally you'll get this tear regardless of whether your knocking point is too high or too low. If you do get this, move your rest up, down, up. Follow the point, basically. So this bit here, you'd move it to the right. This bit here, you move it to the left, move it down, move it up. But the only 100% proof you get from paper tuning, a dramatic drum roll should have been added there, is the fact that your arrow can pass through a piece of paper. It does not prove anything. Really, it proves that your arrow travels through a bit of paper. Okay? You cannot guarantee setup just by putting it through paper. Okay? If you get a nice tear, it's a great thing to take a picture of and put on Instagram or Facebook. Other than that, that's it. Not everybody gets a bullet hole. Fact. It is almost impossible to paper tune someone else's setup. One of my biggest gripes is the amount of people that say to me, but I had my bow tuned by so-and-so, they shot it through paper. That's great, but that's not you. You have to do your own bow, or your archers have to do their own bows. It's very difficult to mimic someone else's shot. So it's quite difficult to then get the same results as somebody else. I've never failed to get a bullet hole out of a bow because I know how to torque the riser to get the right result. So yes, I could get anyone's bow to bullet hole because I'll cheat the system. It's not difficult, okay? Always paper tune at the same distance. Don't expect to get a bullet hole at 5 meters, 7 meters, 9 meters, 10 meters. Whatever distance you do it at, always do it at the same. The simple way to do that is do it at your long rod length. So if your long rod is just touching a bit of paper, you know you're at the same distance away. Unless you're lucky enough, like I am, to have a workshop that you can just spray paint 2 lines on the floor, and that's how it's done. What angle should the launcher blade be set to? That's a hard one. I think it depends on a myriad of different things. You can't really have it too laid down. You can have it too vertical. Just because you wear blades out too quickly if they're too vertical. I'll come back to you on that because it is something I want to check and I want to test. Walk back tuning is fairly simple. I'm assuming you all have shot a recurve, so it's fairly simple. And it's not French tuning because we invented it. It's walk back tuning. Arrows move to the left, arrows stay in the center, or arrows move right. They are your 3 options. If they move to the right, move your rest left. If your arrows move to the left, move your rest right. Simple. Peep sights. Now I want to quickly do peep sights because that's like the one of my questions. So I'm gonna. Someone wrote a really good question about how do you micro tune the angle of a peep sight. It isn't something I normally cover because it's something that's actually it's often overlooked. Ironic for a peep sight. But if you can see this, my peep sight is. Max. Oh, I've just broken something. Can everybody see my peep sight? Yeah, here. So at the moment it is at an angle. Okay. If I slide my peep sight ties up, can you see the angle changed? And if I slide it down, the angle changes again. So the really simple way to micro tune the angle of your peep sight is to tie a longer tie and just gently slide it up and down until you get it straight. When it's straight, just tie underneath like crazy and stop it from moving, and your job done. It's as simple as that. You can spend 15 years moving each individual strand around the peep sight and around the peep sight and around the peep sight, but then you need to go back to the press and it's just a bit of a faff. So it's just easier, slide these up and down. Can everybody see that? So if I slide these ties up and down, because of the twists in the string, it will rotate the peep sight. So to make sure you're micro tuning, it's hard to do with one hand, but you can see it twisted, and it twists back again, and it twists back. So just by playing with these ties, you can micro tune the angle quite effectively and quite quickly. Okay, peep sight height, really simply, whatever so if you're shooting indoors, you want your peep sight set so that if you draw up with your eyes shut, anchor, open your eyes, you want to be able to see your sight through your peep sight and the target. Outdoors, if you're only shooting 50 meters, you do the same in 50 meters. If you're shooting multiple distances, find whichever one you feel comfortable with and do it at that. Normally, I'd say 50 meters because it's kind of halfway. So your peep height is in the right height for all of the distances. You can take far too long over your peep sight alignment up and down. As long as you can see through it when you're anchored in the full draw, I really wouldn't worry too much about it. Just leave it there. If you start anchoring down here to see through it, then you've obviously got a problem. But other than that, leave it. Have we got more questions? Any advice on the size of the peep? There's very few things I give on material of the ties. I use 3D from BCY. It's not the cheapest material, but it's the easiest thing to use. Peep size, it really depends what you want to see. It sounds like a really stupid question, a stupid answer, but there's two leading theories, and different world leading archers have different setups, so you can't really say which one's better. Okay, so one theory is you have your peep sight, camera's down here, and you have the scope. So what you can see through your peep sight is the scope ring, the very outside of the scope ring, and nothing else. Okay, so if you're perfectly in line, you can see through your peep sight to the scope ring and then the target beyond. That's one theory, and that's how I shoot. The second theory is you have your peep sight, your scope ring, and a tiny little, and I'm talking about a 2 or 3 millimeter halo of air around the outside. Okay, the theory behind that is it's easier to center more circles because your brain likes circles to be lined up. So it's easier to center a scope that's round in a round air inside your round peep sight and then at the target. However, if I do that, I feel so ill because I cannot work out what bit I'm trying to look at. I can't look at the air around the outside of my scope to make sure it's in the right place, then at my scope to make sure that's in the right place, and then at the target to see if my dot's in the right place. It just confuses me. It may be that that's because I'm a bit dim, and everyone else might say that it's the other way around. But try it. You can have a peep sight that's too big. So if you can see too more, if you can see too much around the outside of your scope, it then becomes really hard to work out whether you're in line or out of line. But the smaller you make your peep sight, the darker it is. Therefore, the harder it is, especially if you're doing field or you shoot pretty much anywhere indoors in this country with a pooling light. It just isn't great. Thoughts on scope size? What happens to GB bows? Why wouldn't you recommend someone buy one? Just they've flown around the world a lot. Just they've flown. Airlines don't like carrying things. They just throw them around. Just my opinion. Thoughts on scope size? Depends what you want to see. My thoughts on magnification are 0.5 or 0.75. Anything more than that just makes it so hard to aim with. The higher the magnification, the easier it is, or the more it appears that you're moving around on target. The more it appears you're moving around on target, the harder it is to aim. Most people that say they've got target panic basically have a scope that's too high a mag. If you have someone that's struggling with target panic, make them shoot a 2.5 or take a lens out entirely. It's quite a good way of getting back into it. Is recurve measured draw length transferable to compound? No. I'm like that. Like 4 people made exactly the same faces that I did then. Yes and no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. The thing you got to remember with compound is you tend to anchor a lot further back. So if I'm here, obviously my recurve draw length is going to be more like here. So I've gained whatever that is. And then your D loop's got to be taken into account. So they're close. Sometimes they're the same. It's rare that they're a million miles off. So if you've only got a recurve draw length to go by, it's a great way to start. However, don't be surprised if it isn't the same. Any other questions? Have I bored you all enough? None of you are asleep that I can see, which is a bonus, actually. Ooh, thoughts on cam shimming and top hat systems? I don't think I've got time to do that. I think cam shim and top hat systems are probably the best adjustable features that have come into compound because they're solid. You can't mess them up while you're shooting normally. However, top hat systems have caused more damage to compound bows through people not using them properly than I think anything else. Any suggestions for further reading? No, because all the decent books that I read a long time ago, they've been out of print for 10 years. There isn't really, the problem with writing a book, and I've tried to do it, the problem with writing a book is that by the time you've actually finished writing it, technology has moved on again. So it's kind of a waste of, not a waste of time, but you can buy it, but it's not going to be relevant in like a week or a month or 2 months time. I'll just do Maggie's question on release aids. This is probably going to make a lot of people cringe, but I think every single beginner that shoots compound should be given either a hinge or a resistance activated release aid for at least a year. Someone putting their thumb up. A, B, C, D, was that a thumb up? Yay! The problem with triggers, if people punch them, give them something they can't punch, they can learn to shoot, and then give them something they can shoot in the wind. It just makes so much sense to me. To me, it would be like, it's like getting a 17-year-old going, here's an F1 car, look at Elise controls, try and drive that. And by the way, when you've learned to drive that, you can then get in a normal car. Nobody does that. You learn to drive in a normal car because you can't mess that up too much. And then you go to the F1 car. I don't know why archery likes making things easy to do it wrong. If you get rid of the trigger, learn to shoot, then Once you know how to shoot, then go get a trigger. Triggers are more commonly shot at high level, mainly because you have some element of control. Resistance activated release aids like the Carter Evolution, I should be honest and name other brands, but I can't think of it. Stan do one. Couldn't tell you what it's called. But there are lots of different resistance activated release aids out there, which means you should be able to get your hands on something that you can use to teach with. They take a little while to set up properly. Stan Element, thank you, whoever wrote that. It is the Stan Element. But yeah, that's what you want. You want to learn on something that you can't mess up. There used to be, although they're banned for tournaments, there used to be electric release aids made by Carter that were brilliant. So you'd draw up, you'd press a button, and it would randomly go off between 5 and 9 seconds, I think it was. And to teach people with, absolutely brilliant, because they learned what the shot should feel like. Damn scary, but brilliant. Resistance is far better. Is that Maggie saying the electric ones are not better? I'm a little bit upset by that. True ball sweet spot, yeah, good hinge, and it's got a safety.